My daughter stopped calling me mom, and I found out my husband was funding another family with our money. My mother likes to say that bad weather follows big decisions in our family, and honestly, she is not wrong. The night I met my husband, the sky was throwing a tantrum. There was this emergency weather alert, roads closing, sirens in the distance, the whole drama, and I ended up stuck in this small highway restaurant with a bunch of strangers who were all pretending not to be scared. Someone had dragged a battery-powered lantern onto one of the tables when the lights flickered. People were talking too loudly, and the workers kept checking their phones like they had any control over the storm. I remember sitting there with my coffee going cold, thinking I just wanted to get home, take off my shoes, and not have to make small talk with anyone. My name is Talia, by the way. Back then, I was the kind of person who always had a charger in my bag, snacks in the glove box, and a backup plan for every scenario, except apparently what to do when the sky decided to shut down the whole town. I was driving back from visiting my mother when the officers waved everyone off the main road and into this restaurant parking lot, and they told us we might as well get comfortable. So I picked a booth near the window and sat there scrolling on a social media app, pretending the rain pounding sideways against the glass did not freak me out. He sat down across from me because the place was packed and there were no empty tables left. He asked if he could sit. I said sure without really looking up. And then he made some stupid joke about the universe forcing people to make friends. I laughed more out of nerves than anything, and somehow that turned into a 3-hour conversation about jobs, bad bosses, childhoods, and how this town never seemed prepared for anything more dramatic than mild rain. By the time the weather calmed down enough for us to move our cars to a safer lot, I knew he had been married once before. He worked in building maintenance for a company in the next town over, and his family lived about 20 minutes from where I grew up. We added each other on a social media app before we left, mostly because I did not want to give my number to a man I had just met in atmospheric chaos. A week later, he messaged me about some silly weather meme, then another, and before I realized what was happening, we were talking every day. A month later, we were officially seeing each other. It felt easy, like I had been waiting to exhale for years and finally could. No fancy dinners, no dramatic gestures, just slow walks in the park, late-night messages, and him fixing small things in my apartment without me asking because he noticed stuff like that. 2 years after that storm night, we got married in a small ceremony in a community hall with folding chairs and a friend of my mother playing music from her phone hooked up to a speaker. It was not glamorous, but it was ours. People cried, people ate, people danced badly. I remember thinking I was making a safe choice. That was the word I kept repeating in my head every time I looked at him. Safe. After growing up watching my mother stretch every dollar and fight about bills with whoever she was dating at the time, safe sounded better than exciting. About 7 years ago, our daughter was born. She was 6 when this whole thing started unraveling. She came into the world loud, wriggling, and impatient, and nothing in my life has been quiet since. She is one of those kids who wakes up at full volume, talks with her whole body, and somehow gets sticky even when there is no food nearby. I loved her so much it scared me. I cut my hours down and took a job as an administrative assistant at a small office instead of staying full-time at my previous place because I wanted afternoons with her. My schedule became 9 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, just enough to help with the bills but still be there for pickup at school and homework and dinner. On paper, our life looked fine. We had a small house with peeling paint in a calm neighborhood, 2 old cars that were fully paid off, a fridge that was usually full enough, and a routine that made sense. I was not dreaming of luxury. I wanted stability. I wanted my daughter to grow up without having to hear adults whispering about money in the next room, the way I did. Then one day my daughter came home from school vibrating with excitement about dance classes. She burst through the door, threw her backpack partially in the right direction, and went, "Mom, can I tell you something? Please, please, please." I was standing at the counter trying to figure out what to make for dinner with a bag of rice, some frozen vegetables, and not much else. I told her yes, of course, tell me everything. Because that is what you say when your 6-year-old looks like a shaken soda. She started talking a mile a minute about a girl in her class who goes to dance school twice a week. She described every detail, from the sparkly shoes to the mirrors on the walls to how they all line up and stretch and jump. She told me she pretended to do the moves at recess and that her teacher said she has really good balance for her age. Then she grabbed my hands and said, "Can I do it too? Please? I want to dance. I can be good at it. I promise I will listen." I looked at her face. Those huge eyes, the way she believed the world might actually say yes to her, and my automatic response was sure, of course, we will figure it out. In my head, I was already rearranging numbers. I knew we did not have a ton of extra money lying around, but this was not a luxury trip to a resort. This was an after-school class at a local studio. I imagined a monthly payment that maybe would sting a little but not destroy us. That night after our daughter went to bed, I brought it up with my husband while we were sitting on the couch. The television was on some show we were not really watching, and I said, "Hey, she wants to do dance. I think it would be really good for her. She has so much energy." And she loved the idea. What do you think? He made this noise, half laugh, half snort. The kind he does when he thinks something is ridiculous, but does not want to fully say it yet. "Dance classes?" he said. "Babe, have you seen our account balance?" I admitted I had not looked closely in a while because he handled the big things. He paid the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance. I paid for groceries out of my paycheck and covered random kid stuff like socks and school fundraisers. That is how we divided it. He pulled out his phone, opened the banking app, and handed it to me. The numbers looked tight, tighter than I expected. There was a little left after the bills, but not enough to feel safe adding a new monthly expense. At least that is what it looked like. Scrolling through a list of payments and transfers I did not fully understand because I was not the one who set them up. I frowned. "I thought we were doing okay," I said. "You never said anything." "We are doing okay," he said. And there was that patient tone he uses when he thinks I am being emotional. But extras like this, right now, with just my full-time paycheck really carrying everything, it is not the time. Maybe next year. She will be fine playing in the backyard. Kids do not need all these fancy classes. I pointed out that my paycheck was not imaginary, that I did contribute. He shrugged and said, "You work part-time, Talia. It helps, but it is not the same. I am just being realistic here. You want us to lose the house so she can twirl around twice a week?" The way he said realistic made me feel stupid. Like I had suggested buying a yacht instead of signing our kid up for a community class. I let it go that night, or at least I acted like I did. But something about it stuck under my skin. I was very aware that I had grown up without any kind of activity like that. And it felt like the universe was replaying the same scene on a loop with a new cast. The next week, our daughter brought home a flyer from the dance school. It had pictures of smiling kids, descriptions of different classes, and a price list. The monthly fee was not cheap, but it was not outrageous. It was basically what we spent on takeout in a month when we were too tired to cook. I stared at that paper, at the way she had circled the little dancers with a pencil, and I felt something stubborn rise up in me. That night, after she went to bed, I told my husband I wanted to talk again. He was sitting at the table scrolling his phone, and I said, "Look, I understand the budget is tight, but I want her to do this. I can get a second job. Something early in the morning. I will figure it out." He looked up, surprised. "A second job? Doing what?" "I do not know," I said. "A diner, a coffee place, something like that. I can work mornings before my office shift. If I bring in more money, we can afford it. It is not like I am asking you to pay for everything alone." He leaned back in his chair, studied me for a second, and then nodded slowly. "If you really want to do that, I am not going to stop you," he said. "Maybe that would finally balance things out. Then you can see what it is like to carry more of the load." I should have paused at that sentence. The way he said it had an edge that did not feel like partnership. It felt like he was waiting for me to admit some kind of failure. But I was too focused on the image of my daughter in a sparkly skirt, grinning in front of a mirror, to unpack his tone. Within a week, I found a job at a small restaurant 10 minutes from our house. They needed someone for the early morning shift, serving coffee and breakfast plates to construction workers and older couples who liked to be up before the sun. The hours were brutal. I had to wake up before 5 in the morning, slip out of the house while everyone else was asleep, work from 6 until around 8:30, then rush to my office job, getting there by 9:30 to start my shift until 2, depending on how fast I could close out my tables and drive. The first morning I did it, my whole body screamed at me by noon. My feet hurt, my back hurt, my eyes burned. But I went home, picked up my daughter from school, helped her with homework, made dinner, and collapsed on the couch after she went to bed. When I told my husband I felt like I had melted from the inside, he just shrugged and said, "Welcome to the real world. We all do what we have to do." After a few weeks of that schedule, I was living on caffeine and stubbornness. I told myself it was temporary, that as soon as the money stabilized and she started her dance classes, I could cut back. I kept asking him when we should go to the studio, when we could sign her up, and every time he had an excuse. He said the registration dates had changed, or we had missed the cutoff, or we should wait until the new semester. He always said it in that calm voice, like he was being reasonable and I was being dramatic. Meanwhile, our daughter started saying weird little things. It began with small comments, thrown out casually while she colored on the living room floor or played with her dolls. She would say, "When she does my hair, it does not hurt like when you do it." Or, "She says I am really good at skipping." I assumed she was talking about a teacher at school or some friend's mother. Kids pick up random adults all the time. One afternoon, I came home from the office and found her sitting on the couch watching a cartoon. And she looked up at me and said, "Oh, hey, Talia," like we were two roommates passing each other. I laughed, confused, and said, "What did you call me?" She blinked. "Talia." "I am Mom," I reminded her. "You know that, right?" She tilted her head and said, "She calls you Talia, so I thought that is what I should say." "Is that wrong?" My stomach did that slow drop feeling. "Who calls me Talia?" I asked. She shrugged, like this was the most boring question in the world. "Dad's friend." I tried to keep my voice even. "What friend?" "The one who lives in the building with the pool," she said. "The one with the pink room. The one who bought me the sparkle dress." You know. I did not know. That night, after she went to bed, I asked my husband about it. I told him she had mentioned some friend of his, someone who did her hair and had a pool and a pink room. He did not even look up from his phone when he answered. "Oh, that," he said. "She is just a friend from work. She went through a bad breakup and she likes kids. Sometimes she hangs out when I have our daughter and you are working. It is easier to have another adult around, you know? Nothing weird." "Why did you not tell me about her?" I asked. He finally looked at me then, eyebrows raised. "Because there was nothing to tell. She is just someone who needed a distraction and our daughter likes her." "You are working nonstop, Talia. I am just trying to give our kids some fun." I wanted to argue, but the way he said working nonstop hit a nerve. I was exhausted, and he was not technically wrong about that part. So I swallowed the weird feeling and told myself I was being paranoid. People can have friends. People can help each other. Not every story is a bad movie. The problem was the comments kept coming. My daughter started casually comparing me to this invisible woman. She would say, "She braids my hair better." Or, "She lets me have dessert first." Or, "She said I should call you by your name so you do not feel old." And she would giggle like it was a joke I was supposed to enjoy. Every time, I felt something sharp in my chest. One afternoon, I tried to gently push for more information. We were coloring at the kitchen table. And I asked, "So, this friend of Dad's, what do you like about her?" My daughter shrugged, using the same colored pencil for the entire drawing because of course she did. "She is fun," she said. "She takes me places. She looks like the ladies on the shows you watch. She says I am her favorite girl." I smiled tightly and said, "I thought I was your favorite girl." She laughed, real and bright. "You are my mom. That is different." That night, after another 10-hour stretch between my two jobs, I came home to an empty house. The lights were off, the television silent, no shoes by the door. My messages to my husband sat there unread for a while before he finally replied saying they were getting ice cream and would be home soon. They showed up almost an hour later, my daughter hyper and sticky, wearing a shirt I had never seen before, and chattering about some animated movie they had supposedly just watched in a theater. There was no ice cream in sight. I waited until my daughter was in the bath before I cornered him in the hallway. "You said you were getting ice cream," I said. "She said you went to the movies. Which one is it?" He rolled his eyes. "You are really going to interrogate me over this?" "I am asking because I woke up before sunrise, worked at the restaurant, went to the office, picked her up, and there was nobody here. I just want to know where my kid is when I am not around. That is not crazy." He crossed his arms. "We went out. She had a good time. Why do you have to turn everything into a problem?" "Because you are lying about details that do not need to be lies," I said. "If you went to the movies, just say that. If there is another woman there, just say that. I am not stupid." His eyes went cold in a way I had never seen before. He stepped closer, dropped his voice, and said, "Maybe if you were more fun, our daughter would still call you Mom instead of Talia. Did you think about that?" I felt that sentence physically. It was like someone had reached into my chest and flipped a switch. I did not say anything back. I could not. I just walked into the bathroom and washed my daughter's hair like nothing in the world had changed, even though everything had. Over the next few months, the patterns got harder to ignore. On nights when I was not working the morning shift at the restaurant, he suddenly had work dinners, late meetings, errands that took hours. The receipts in his pockets told a different story, though. Fancy restaurants, tickets, charges for games and attractions nowhere near his job. He started wearing new clothes, a nicer watch, cologne that did not smell cheap. When I mentioned the dance classes again, He said we still could not afford them after everything he had shown me in our bank account. Except apparently we could afford a lot of other things. I tried to look at his social media, but he was careful there. No tagged photos, no obvious posts. A ghost. One day a holiday fell on a weekday and my office closed early. I went home expecting to find them there, maybe playing in the yard, but the house was empty. My calls went unanswered for a while, then he texted that they were out getting ice cream again. They came home with a bag from a toy store, and my daughter wearing a little bracelet that definitely did not come from some cheap stand. That night I could not stand the fog anymore. I needed facts. The next day, instead of eating lunch at my desk, I drove to the bank where our joint account lived. I walked in with my identification and my heart pounding, and I asked to print the last year of statements. The teller looked at me with that slightly apologetic sympathy that says they have seen this before, and after a few questions and a signature, she handed me a thick stack of paper. I sat in my car and read every line. The pattern was right there, in plain ink. On the first day of almost every month, there was a transfer from our joint account into another account I did not recognize. The amounts were not small. They ranged from amounts that could cover the mortgage to amounts that could cover an entire month of groceries and utilities combined. On top of that, there were extra transfers sprinkled throughout random weeks, many of them lined up neatly with days he had told me he was working late or out of town for training. There were charges from places we had never been together. A restaurant in another city, a hotel near a shopping center, tickets for attractions my daughter had described, like the aquarium with the big tunnel and the amusement park with the kiddie roller coaster. There was a payment to a jewelry store right before winter holidays. And I remembered the cheap scented candle I got that year while our daughter got a stuffed animal from a discount bin. I went home and dug through his desk drawers and the little safe where we kept paperwork. Behind the old tax forms and warranties, I found a folder with printouts from a different bank, in his name only. The account number matched the one on the transfers. There were deposits from his overtime, from odd jobs, from whatever else he had set up. There was also a document about property taxes for an apartment in a building across town, with a little picture on the top right corner. The building had a pool. I flipped the page over and saw an address I recognized from something my daughter had said offhandedly once, about cars in a parking lot near a playground. A small laughing sound escaped me, not because anything was funny, but because my brain was trying to protect itself from overload. I sat on the floor of our bedroom with that folder open and thought, so this is what carrying more of the load looks like. I wish I could say I confronted him immediately, that I shoved the papers in his face and delivered a movie-worthy monologue. Instead, I put everything back where I found it, took photos of every page with my phone, and went to work like nothing had changed. I smiled at customers at the restaurant, answered phones at the office, nodded along when people complained about little inconveniences that suddenly felt like a parody of my life. I also quietly made an appointment with a family law attorney. The day of the consultation, I told my husband I had to stay a little late at the office to finish some paperwork. Technically, that was not a lie. There was paperwork involved. I drove to this small office building near the courthouse, sat in a chair that was surprisingly comfortable, and told a stranger more about my life in 45 minutes than I had told my own mother in years. The attorney was calm and mostly expressionless in that way that makes you feel both judged and protected at the same time. She listened as I explained the second job, the mystery friend, the bank statements, the property documents. I watched her eyes flick down to the photographs of the statements I had printed, to the pictures of my daughter at an amusement park I had never taken her to, wearing a ballerina outfit I had never seen. When she finally spoke, she did not ask anything about my feelings. She asked what I wanted. It caught me off guard. I had been so focused on what was happening to me that I had not fully framed what I wanted beyond stop this. I sat there with my hands twisted together and said, I want my daughter back. I mean, she is here, but I feel like I am losing her to this whole other life I did not sign up for. I want to stop funding whatever he is doing. I want some kind of safety net, and I want him to understand that I am not stupid. The attorney nodded like this was a reasonable shopping list. She explained, in simple terms, what the options were. There could be a separation, temporary custody agreements, financial disclosures forced through the court. She told me that the hidden transfers and property could work in my favor, especially if I kept gathering evidence. She also told me very gently not to confront him with everything yet. Not until there was a plan, because cornered people do unpredictable things. I walked out of that office with a folder full of information and a feeling like someone had finally turned on a light in a room I had been stumbling through for months. At home, things got stranger. I rearranged my schedule at the restaurant. Instead of working most weekday mornings, I shifted to weekend brunch shifts only. It meant less money, sure, but it also meant I could take our daughter to school every day, pick her up, and be present in the afternoons. My husband did not like that. He asked, all casual, why I had changed my shifts. I answered, also casual, that my body was tired and I wanted to see our daughter more. He said that meant less extra income, and I said we would make it work. The way his jaw tightened told me he understood more than he let on. He had been counting on my absence. I took our daughter out for ice cream after school one day. Just the two of us. We sat on a bench outside a little shop, and I told her about the dance studio down the street. I told her we were going to sign her up. She screamed so loud 2 people turned around to look at us. I had already paid for 3 months in advance using money I had quietly set aside from my restaurant tips instead of handing every dollar over to our joint account. When I mentioned the dance classes that night at dinner, my husband blinked slowly and said, "We talked about that. We cannot afford it." "I paid for the first 3 months," I said, keeping my voice steady. "With my tips. It is done. She starts next week." He looked at me like I had spoken an entirely different language. There was this flicker of something, anger, maybe, or fear, before he plastered on a smile for our daughter and said how exciting that was. I knew then that whatever investments he had made in his secret life, he had been counting on every part of my schedule, every penny of my effort, lining up just so. About 3 weeks after I changed my work schedule, I got a message from my mother-in-law, inviting us to a party. She wanted to celebrate her anniversary with a big family dinner. Everyone was going to be there, she said. Her exact words were, "We cannot wait to finally meet that friend who has been such a help with our granddaughter. He told us she is practically part of the family already." I sat there staring at my phone for a full minute, reading that sentence over and over. My husband had not just kept this woman a secret from me, he had integrated her into his version of our family narrative with his parents. He had talked about her like I was some career-obsessed stranger who had abandoned motherhood for ambition, and this other woman had stepped in as a kind of bonus mom. I called my mother-in-law. I could have texted, but I needed to hear her voice. I kept my tone light, made small talk for a bit, and then asked casually about this friend. She was more than happy to share. He had told them that I was working 2 jobs because I wanted to build my career, that I had made it clear the house and child care were his responsibility now. He had spun it so he looked like the noble, overworked father, and this other woman was the fun, nurturing helper. My mother-in-law said she felt bad for him, seeing him juggle so much. She said this woman had even come over for dinner one night when I was apparently busy. I ended the call politely, said we would all be there, and then sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and screamed until my throat hurt. It was the kind of ugly animal sound that does not fit into words. I cried so hard I had to redo my makeup before going inside to buy the things on my list. That night, I called my own mother. I had not told her much about what was going on because I did not want the "I told you so" conversation about getting married young, sharing finances, all of that. But when she picked up and heard my voice, she switched straight into protective mode. I told her everything. The second job, the friend, the bank statements, the apartment with the pool, the mother-in-law's message. There was a long silence on the line, and then my mother said, "I am getting in the car tomorrow. I am coming. You are not doing this by yourself." True to her word, she showed up the next afternoon with a small suitcase and a face that dared anyone to challenge her. She slept on our couch that night like a guard dog. The tension in the air was thick. My husband did not know exactly what she knew, but he could feel the shift. He made a show of being cheerful, making jokes at dinner, insisting everything was fine. My daughter, blissfully unaware, chattered on about dance and school and how excited she was about the party at her grandparents' house. The night before the party, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, running through different scenarios in my head. I could confront him at home, away from everyone, but part of me wanted witnesses. I wanted his version of the story to collide with reality in front of the people he had charmed so easily. That sounds petty, and maybe it was. But after months of feeling like I was going crazy inside my own life, I needed someone else to see what I had seen. The next day, we all got dressed and drove to his parents' house. My mother sat in the passenger seat like a quiet storm. My daughter sang along to a song only she could hear in her head. My husband drove with his fingers tapping the steering wheel, glancing at the rearview mirror more often than necessary. When we pulled up to the house, his mother came out onto the porch with open arms and that high-pitched voice she uses when she is performing happiness. Inside, people were setting out food, were talking in clusters, laughing. I put my bag down, took a breath, and then reached in to pull out the folder I had tucked there. Bank statements, property documents, photos. I waited until most of the family had gathered in the living room, until my daughter was outside in the yard with my mother and some cousins, safely out of earshot. Then I walked over to my mother-in-law and handed her the folder. "I think you should see this before your special guest arrives," I said, keeping my voice calm, almost polite. My husband's head snapped around like someone had yanked a string attached to his neck. She looked confused for a second, then opened the folder. Her eyes moved from line to line, from page to page. She saw the transfers from our joint account to the secret one, the property tax documents with the address of the apartment, the photos of my daughter at the aquarium, at the amusement park, in a pink room I had never seen. Her mouth opened and closed twice before she looked up at her son. "Is this true?" she asked. He started talking before the sentence was even fully out of her mouth. He called it a misunderstanding, an investment opportunity, a temporary arrangement. He said I had blown things out of proportion, that I had always been dramatic, that he had done what he had to do because I had checked out of the marriage. He used big, vague words instead of small, honest ones. He never once said, "I am sorry." His father picked up one of the statements, read it carefully, and then glared at him in a way I had never seen. "You took money from your own household and put it into a secret account," he said quietly. "You bought a place across town and did not tell your wife? You introduced our granddaughter to another woman like this and did not think anyone needed to know?" Before my husband could answer, the front door opened and a woman walked in. I knew it was her before anyone said anything. She looked exactly like my daughter had described, polished, styled, wearing a dress that cost more than my entire outfit put together. She held a wrapped gift in her hands and had the nerve to smile like she belonged there. My sister-in-law, who had been watching all of this from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward with the kind of energy that makes you grateful she is on your side. She looked the woman up and down and said, "So you are the one who did not know he was married?" The woman's smile faltered. She looked at my husband, back at my sister-in-law, then at me. "He said they were basically separated," she said. "He said they were staying together for the kid until things sorted themselves out." I did not know. My sister-in-law grabbed one of the photos from the coffee table, the one where my husband, the woman, and my daughter were at the amusement park, everyone smiling like a brochure. She held it up between them. "This was taken less than a month ago," she said. "Does this look like a man who is separated?" The woman took one look at the picture, then another at the pile of documents, and something like realization passed over her face. She put the gift down on the nearest surface and said, "I am leaving." My husband tried to follow her, to explain, but his father stepped between them. "No," his father said. "You stay right here." In that moment, for the first time since the storm night all those years ago, I saw my husband without the filter of love, habit, or shared history. I saw him scramble, try to spin, try to stand in 3 different versions of the story at once. It was almost a relief having other people see it too. I did not make a big speech. I did not throw anything or cry in front of them. I just said, "I have already spoken to an attorney. I will be filing for separation. I thought you all should know why." Then I went outside, found my daughter in the yard, and told her we were going home early. My mother followed us, putting a steadying hand on my back as we walked to the car. My daughter was confused and disappointed, asking why we had to leave before dessert, but I just told her we were having a special movie night at home. I drove away from that house with my heart pounding and my hands steady on the wheel. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and logistics. I met with the attorney again, this time with signatures and forms to sign. We filed the initial documents for separation and temporary custody. I opened my own bank account at a different institution and arranged for my paycheck from the office job to go there instead of the joint one. I changed the direct deposit for my restaurant tips where I could, and for the cash I simply stopped leaving it in the envelope he thought I used. He moved out less than a week later. He came while I was at work, which was honestly a blessing. My mother was home, and she watched him carry out his clothes and gadgets and personal things while my daughter was at school. He left a note on the kitchen table that said he needed space to think. I laughed when I saw it. I did not know how someone could need space to think after spending so much energy creating additional spaces all over town. My daughter took it hard. Of course she did. She did not understand layers of betrayal or financial manipulation. All she knew was that her dad was not sleeping in the house anymore, and that she did not see the woman with the pink room as often. She cried at night, asked if he still loved her, asked if I still loved him, asked if she could keep going to the pool at the apartment. Every time she asked those questions, something in me twisted. I tried to answer honestly without being cruel. I told her that her father loved her very much, that adults sometimes make bad choices that have nothing to do with their kids, that we were figuring out a new normal. I did not tell her that I wanted to scream every time I drove past an apartment complex with a pool. The legal process moved slowly, the way all bureaucratic things do. There were forms to fill out, disclosures to be made, dates to schedule. The hidden account came up, of course. The property came up. The attorney told me that his decision to funnel money away from our joint responsibilities would work in my favor for settlements. The apartment was eventually included in the asset division, though by the time everything was finalized, he had already signed it over to her name. Convenient how quickly people can shuffle paperwork when they want to hide things. It did not make me feel vindicated so much as tired. During that time, I cut my restaurant shifts down even more. I worked one weekend morning instead of 4, choosing sleep and sanity over a slightly bigger tip jar. I kept my office job from 9 to 2, because it came with stability and the rhythm of routine. Every afternoon, I picked my daughter up from school, took her to dance, sat in the lobby watching her stumble and twirl, and slowly find her balance. Standing there with the other parents, sipping coffee and pretending not to be competitive about whose kid had the fanciest spins, I felt almost normal. Then my daughter would turn toward the window with that big grin, wave at me like I was the most important person in the room, and I would feel the sting of what I had almost lost without even realizing it. He tried to talk to me a couple of times. He showed up at the restaurant once, sliding into a booth while I was on my break. My manager spotted the stiffness in my shoulders and walked over like he might throw him out himself. My husband said he just wanted to talk, to explain, to ask if there was any way to fix things. I told him that if he had wanted to fix things, he could have started by not building an entire side life funded by my lack of sleep. He said it was not like that I did not understand what it felt like to be the primary provider. I reminded him that I had been working 2 jobs while doing most of the housework, and he had been using my effort as a cover for his sneaking around. He said he had felt lonely, that I had been distant. I told him that sometimes when you pull away from someone you promised to stand beside, they get distant because they are busy trying not to drown. He did not like that answer. I watched the frustration flicker across his face, the way he wanted me to meet him halfway on this, like we were 2 people who had accidentally drifted apart instead of one person who had quietly moved in with someone else on weekends. My manager eventually came over and said he needed to leave if he was not ordering anything. I did not stop him when he got up. His parents called a few times. His father apologized for his son's behavior, said he was ashamed and did not know how to fix things. His mother cried on the phone, torn between love for her son and horror at what he had done. I told them I would never keep their granddaughter from them, but I also would not pretend everything was fine. They came over a couple of times, bringing food and gifts and awkward stories, and my daughter soaked up the attention. In quieter moments, when she was at school and my mother had gone back to her own life, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to figure out how I had ended up here. I replayed the storm night in my head, the way his jokes had sounded like safety, the way I had given up my own financial independence in the name of partnership. I thought about all the times I had let him control the narrative, from the bank accounts to the story he told his parents to the way he framed my work. I felt stupid, used, angry, heartbroken, and weirdly relieved all at once. Relieved because the confusion was gone. I no longer had to wonder if I was being paranoid or insecure. The facts were laid out in black and white on those bank statements. The photos of my daughter in the pink room were real. The property tax documents did not lie. After putting my daughter to bed one night, I finally let myself absorb what had changed. My life was smaller in some ways now. There was no second income from dawn shifts at the restaurant, no partner on the other side of the bed, no illusion of a fully intact family. But it was also bigger in a different way. There was room for me to hear my own thoughts again, for me to make decisions without worrying whether they fit into a story someone else had rehearsed. My daughter shuffled out of her room with sleep hair and a serious face. She climbed into my lap and asked, "Are we going to be okay?" I hugged her and said, "Yes, we are. It might be different, and it might be hard sometimes, but we are going to be okay." She thought about that for a second and then said, "Can I still go to dance?" I laughed, real and soft, and said, "You are not getting rid of those classes even if I have to dance in the lobby for extra money." She giggled at that image, rested her head on my shoulder, and pretty soon she was snoring lightly against my neck. I sat there holding her, feeling the weight of her trust and the messy shape of our future. And I realized that the safe choice I thought I had made all those years ago was never about him. It was about me. About believing that I could build something stable and honest without compromising who I was. I had lost a husband I thought I knew, a version of my life that looked good on the outside, and a little piece of blind faith I did not even realize I still had. But I had held on to my daughter, my sanity, and my sense of reality. I had dragged the truth into the light, even when it made everybody uncomfortable. So no, this is not some neat story with a tidy lesson about forgiveness and starting over together. There is no miraculous change of heart, no dramatic reunion at the door in the rain. There is just me, a woman who got up before sunrise for months to fund her own replacement, who finally realized what was happening and walked away from the script everyone else had handed her. I still work at the office from 9 to 2. Sometimes I pick up an extra shift at the restaurant when bills stack up, but I do it on my own terms now. I keep my own account. I know exactly where every dollar goes. And I do not let anyone tell me I am overreacting when my instincts say something is off. My daughter keeps dancing, keeps twirling in our small living room, keeps calling me mom in a way that feels like another chance every time. If there is anything to take from all of this, it is not a moral about staying or leaving or how to be the perfect spouse. It is simpler than that. Pay attention to the story being told about you when you are not in the room. Pay attention to where the money goes. Pay attention when your kid comes home excited about something that should be possible but somehow is not. And if you ever find yourself waking up before dawn, dragging yourself through 2 jobs, and still being told that you are not really contributing, that you are lucky to have whatever scraps of affection are thrown your way, I hope you realize faster than I did that you are allowed to step out of that storm. You are allowed to say, "This weather is not mine to carry anymore," because sometimes the only way to land on your feet is to finally stop being the one everybody else stands on when they want to feel tall. What I did not realize right away was how much leftover debris there would be. Nobody talks about the weird practical parts of blowing up a marriage like this. People will listen to you cry about betrayal and talk about lawyer appointments, but they do not tell you about sitting on the kitchen floor at 11 at night, sorting through a box of random cables he left behind, deciding which ones you might actually need and which ones were just there to make a drawer look full. They do not tell you about realizing the only person who knew how to reset the temperamental heater is gone, and now you are on a video site at midnight, trying to decode some stranger's tutorial. The first official hearing for temporary custody was one of the most surreal days of my life. I sat in a waiting area with hard chairs, holding a folder of documents like a shield. He sat across from me in a pressed shirt, hair too neatly combed, looking like he had dressed up as a responsible adult for a costume party. We barely looked at each other. Our attorneys did most of the talking, using words like schedule and stability and best interest while I stared at a smudge on the wall and tried to breathe normally. When the judge asked if we both understood the proposed schedule, my brain zoomed in on the paper in front of me. Every other weekend with him, one dinner during the week, holidays alternating. It looked so clinical seeing my life and my kids sliced into rectangles on a chart. I hated every line of it and also knew it was probably the fairest version available. I nodded because saying no would not magically give me a better option. He nodded too, eyes fixed on the table. Our daughter adjusted in the only way kids know how, messily. The first time she went to stay at his new place officially, she came back with a new stuffed animal and a story about sleeping in the pink room overlooking the pool. She described the way the lights from the water made the ceiling look at night, how the neighbor's dog barked at every car, how she had cereal with marshmallows for dinner because Dad said it is vacation there. I smiled and asked questions because I did not want to be the parent who made her feel guilty for enjoying herself. Then she casually mentioned that the woman with the polished hair was there too, and my stomach twisted. I had told myself the other woman was gone the day of the party, humiliated enough to never come back. Apparently, humiliation has a shorter shelf life than I thought. That night, after my daughter fell asleep in her own bed, I stood in the hallway staring at her closed door. I wanted to pick up my phone and send a message to the woman, something sharp and precise that would make her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. I had her number from a screenshot my sister-in-law had sent me, just in case. My fingers actually typed out, "Do you enjoy playing house with someone else's family?" before I deleted it. Later, I found out through my sister-in-law that she had gone back to him within a week of the party. Turns out humiliation was not enough to break whatever hold he had on her. Or maybe she just decided his version of the story was easier to believe than mine. Either way, she was still in the picture, still playing pretend family with my kid on weekends, and there was nothing I could legally do about it as long as he was following the custody schedule. Instead, I messaged my sister-in-law and said, "She is still around. They are still playing happy home over there." My sister-in-law replied with a long string of words I cannot repeat around my kid, and then said, "I am sorry. Come over Saturday. We will let the kids destroy my living room, and you can scream into a pillow if you need to." So that is what I did. I went over to her house, watched our kids build a fort out of chairs and blankets, and sat at her counter while she poured coffee into a mug that said something sarcastic about adulthood.
I told her all the petty, ugly thoughts I had been holding in. She did not try to pretty any of it up. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, that tracks. You are allowed to be mad. You are allowed to hate them both and also still care about what happens to him because of your kid. It is all gross and contradictory."
Welcome to the club. Money became its own separate villain during those months. Without his full paycheck in the house, things got tight faster than I expected. The utilities felt higher, the grocery bill stretched longer, everything cost more. I made lists before every shopping trip, stuck to them with religious focus, and still sometimes ended up standing at the checkout line doing math in my head while pretending to scroll my phone. I thought about going back to more shifts at the restaurant, but my body remembered exactly how that felt, and my daughter's face when I told her I would be gone in the mornings was enough to push that idea back into the only if absolutely necessary pile. Instead, I picked up more tasks at the office. My boss offered a small raise if I agreed to handle some extra responsibilities, and I took it before he finished his sentence. It was not a huge amount, but it felt like a tiny breath of air above the surface. On really bad days, I caught myself fantasizing about texting my ex and saying, "Fine, you win. Bring your hidden account back, pay all the bills. I will pretend none of this ever happened." That sounds pathetic to admit, but there were moments at 2 in the morning when the house felt too quiet and the future felt too big, and my brain whispered, "You could just go back." The thing that stopped me every time was a much quieter thought. If I went back, I could never trust myself again. My mother eventually went home, which I knew she would have to. She has her own life, her own obligations, her own bills. Before she left, she did the most my mother thing ever and labeled a bunch of things around my house with sticky notes. The fuse box got a note explaining which switch reset which room. The cabinet under the sink had a note reminding me not to ignore small leaks. The top drawer of my dresser had a note that just said, "You are not stupid," stuck to the inside so I would see it when I grabbed socks. The day after she left, the house felt hollow. I did the dishes in a sink that suddenly seemed too big, folded laundry in a living room that echoed in a way it had not before. My daughter was at school, and I should have been at the office, but I had taken the morning off after the last court date finally set some things in stone. I sat at the table and opened a blank notebook I had bought on impulse weeks earlier. I thought I might start journaling or something equally cliché. Instead, I ended up making lists. Things I needed to pay this month, things I refused to apologize for anymore, things my daughter had said that made me proud, things my ex had said that I never wanted to forget, not so I could stay angry, but so I would remember exactly why going back was never really an option. Somewhere between remember the bank statements and remember the look on his face when his father saw the truth, I realized I had been treating my own memory like a courtroom where he could still argue the case. Every time I softened a detail to make him seem less awful, I was basically acting as his lawyer inside my own head. It was exhausting, and I decided I was done doing that for free. The dance studio became this weird anchor in our week. There was something comforting about the smell of sweat and hairspray, the squeak of little shoes on polished floors, the chaos of parents trying to get glitter out of everything. I started chatting with a couple of other mothers there more regularly. We swapped stories about work, exes, kids throwing tantrums in public places. Every single one of them had some kind of "you will not believe what he did" story tucked somewhere, even if the details were different. One of them, one of Vi, a woman who always wore the same worn-out hoodie but somehow made it look cool, told me about the time her ex emptied their refrigerator and left her with nothing but condiments because he knew she got paid on Fridays. We laughed in that slightly manic way where you are not sure if you are going to cry instead. She said, "Men like that think they are masterminds. They are just loud. Eventually, everybody hears what they are doing." Little by little, things settled into something that looked like a rhythm. Not a perfect one, but a rhythm. Our daughter went to school, went to dance, went to her father's on scheduled days. Sometimes she came back extra clingy, sometimes extra loud, sometimes extra quiet. I learned to stop interrogating her about every detail and instead offered small openings she could walk through if she wanted. "Did you have fun? Anything weird happen? Do you feel okay?" Her answers were not always complete, but her face told me more than her words most days. There were still landmines, of course. The first time she called him to tell him about a little performance at the studio, and he said he could not come because he had plans. I watched her shrink in real time. She smiled and said it was fine, then hung up and pretended it did not matter. Later that night, when she thought I was not watching, she practiced her steps in the hallway with this serious determination that broke my heart. I wanted to call him and scream. I wanted to drive to his apartment and bang on the door and ask if his plans included that polished woman and if they were worth missing his kid's 3-minute recital. Instead, I sat on the floor and danced with my daughter, badly, in the hallway. She laughed at how offbeat I was and corrected my posture like a tiny teacher. It was not the same as having both parents there, but it was something. 6 months into the separation, people around us finally started treating this version of our life as normal. Coworkers stopped giving me the sad eyes when they mentioned their partners. Neighbors stopped asking if they should still invite him to things. Even my mother-in-law adjusted, in her own way. She came over one afternoon with a box of old toys from my husband's childhood and said, "I do not know what to do with these." But I thought maybe she would like them. We sat at my table drinking coffee, and for once she did not try to defend him. She talked about how she never imagined raising a son who could lie so easily. She said she kept replaying moments from his teenage years, looking for signs she missed. I told her she was allowed to love him and still acknowledge he had done something awful. That was the thing I kept having to tell myself too. He and I will probably never be friends again. I do not see a version of us grabbing coffee and laughing about the old days. There is too much burned ground between us for that. But we do manage to talk about holidays now without turning every conversation into a war. We text about pickup times and school events and what size shoes our kid wears this month. Sometimes he tries to sneak in a memory like, "Remember when she used to fit in that little onesie?" And I let it pass without response. Nostalgia is a luxury I cannot afford with him. Every once in a while, I think about that stormy night in the restaurant when we first met. I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen a different booth, or if my battery had been dead so I could not scroll and avoid eye contact, or if I had ignored him when he asked to sit. It is easy to get stuck in that endless game of what if. The problem is, there is no winning version. Maybe I would have met someone worse. Maybe I would have spent another decade thinking stability meant shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. So instead of rewriting the past, I try to pay attention to the present. When my daughter runs out of the studio, hair half falling out of its bun, waving a crumpled sticker she got for trying hard, I listen to her whole story instead of half of it. When my paycheck hits my account, I know exactly how much is going toward rent, toward the light bill, toward groceries, toward one small treat that is just for me and not for survival. When my phone lights up with his name now, my stomach does not drop in the same way. It is more of an irritated sigh, which honestly feels like progress. If you asked me right now if I am happy, I do not know if I could give you a clean answer. I am tired. I am healing. I am still angry sometimes. I am weirdly hopeful on certain days. I miss the idea of what I thought my family would be, more than I miss the man himself. I miss the version of me who thought working 2 jobs to fund a dream for my kid was just sacrifice and not also cover for someone else's lies. But I also like this version of me who double-checks statements, who asks follow-up questions, who believes her own memory. I know people love a tidy arc where the main character goes through hell and then meets someone new who treats her like gold, and everything snaps into place. Maybe that will happen someday. Maybe it will not. My daughter is 7 now, taller, with opinions about everything. Right now, my life is me, my kid, a stack of bills I actually understand, a coffee mug that my sister-in-law bought that says, "Never again with that type," and a dance schedule taped to the fridge. It is not glamorous, but it is mine. So if you are listening to this and thinking, wow, I would never let that happen to me, I hope you are right. I really do. But if some small part of my story sounds uncomfortably familiar, if you have ever sat there wondering why there is never enough money for the thing your kid wants, but somehow there is always enough for mysterious charges you did not approve, if your stomach has ever dropped at the way someone else says your name to your child, I hope you at least know this. You are not losing your mind. You might be in a storm you did not cause. You might have spent years building a life on ground that someone else was quietly digging out from under you. It might feel like stepping away will shatter everything beyond repair. But sometimes, stepping away is the first time the ground stops moving. It is not easy. It is not clean. It is not cinematic. It is just one woman deciding she is done being the background character in the story other people tell about her. And if bad weather really does follow big decisions in my family, then fine. Let it rain. At least this time, I am the one choosing where I sit when the roads close, and I am not handing my keys to anyone who does not know how to drive in it. Sometimes, late at night when the house is finally quiet, I catch myself rehearsing imaginary conversations with my future self. I picture a version of me 10 years from now, older, maybe with more lines on her face, sitting at this same kitchen table or some different one. I imagine asking her if all of this was worth it, if the hearings and the awkward exchanges in parking lots and the nights staring at the ceiling wondering if I ruined everything were worth drawing a line. In my head, she always shrugs and says, "You did the best you could with what you knew. You chose yourself and your kid. That has to count for something." I do not know if that future version of me is right, obviously. I do not know what my daughter will remember most clearly from this time, or which random Tuesday will stick in her head as the moment she realized her parents were not a single unit anymore. I cannot control the story she tells herself later. All I can do is show up now, in all my messy, tired, trying ways, and hope that when she looks back, she remembers that I did not just quietly disappear from my own life when things got hard. So yeah, the storm that started this whole thing feels like a lifetime ago now. Back then, it was weather outside a restaurant window, an excuse to get stuck with a stranger who turned into a husband. These days, the storms are quieter and closer. They are in my chest, in my inbox, in the thin manila envelopes that come with official stamps. But I have learned how to sit through them without handing somebody else the map. If nothing else, that is the part I am weirdly proud of. Not the court forms or the budgeting or even the fact that my kid can now do a decent pirouette. I am proud that when everything cracked open and the easy option would have been pretending not to see it, I looked anyway. I did not look away. I did not let him tell me who I was. I listened to the version of the story that actually lined up with the bank statements and the tiredness in my bones and the way my daughter said my name. Maybe that is not the kind of ending people put in movies, but it is the one I have. Last week, my daughter had her first real recital at the studio. She messed up a turn in the middle, stumbled a little, but kept going with this determined look on her face that reminded me exactly of myself dragging through those restaurant shifts. After the show, she ran to me with her medal bouncing against her chest and said, "Did you see? I did not stop even when I fell." I told her that was the most important part. Not being perfect, just not stopping. And honestly, I will take honest and messy over polished lies any day now.